Tonight I'm going to be presenting on the learning loss plan. I want to first start by talking about some of the buckets of money that we have that this learning loss plan is based on. As you know, we have our ESSER funding 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to skip past ESSER 1 and 2 because it doesn't really apply here. But what we are focusing on is the ARP ESSER 3 funds, where we had about $4 million. We had about $4 million for the ARP ESSER overall funding. Of the $4 million, $4.3 million, there's a used for learning loss, and that's $871,755. So that's already been written in and allocated for learning loss. In addition, there is a new bucket of money, so to speak, which is called the ARP ESSER 7% set aside. That is a new bucket of money that is specifically designed for learning loss, and that's about $241,000. So within the learning loss bucket, as I mentioned, we have funds that are allocated specifically for learning loss within ESSER. So we have $871,755 that has already been allocated within that overall $4 million budget. Now, we haven't necessarily spent all of that. We know that within the ESSER funding, we have that earmarked and we can't touch it because it has to be used for learning loss. So it's earmarked, but it has not all been allocated yet. And that's what today's plan is really going to show you, is a plan for how that money would be spent. In addition, we have that set aside, that $241,000 that I just mentioned, but there is some red tape when it comes to using that. There is some pretty clear criteria on how that 241 can be spent. And in order to have access to that, you have to follow the criteria and spend it in very certain ways. There's also a small chunk of money for the summer enrichment and after school programs as well. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So the application is due on November 29th for the 7% set aside. This includes the $241,000. And you'll see here the specific allocations that we are identified have to be spent in order to get that $241,000. So a minimum of $72,595 needs to be spent on student social, emotional, and mental support. $24,198 needs to be spent on professional development on staff for social, emotional, and mental support. $19,359 needs to be spent on reading support and intervention. And then that leaves us with about $125,831 that is unassigned from that original bucket of $241. In addition, we've been allocated about $48,000 for both summer enrichment and after school programming. And again, what we know about this funding is that in order to use that, you have to check the boxes and make sure that you're using it appropriately for each of those. So I'm going to start first with the student social, emotional, and mental wellness. If you recall, the board has previously approved through the ARP ESSER funding the use of some social emotional support through Lakeside and school counselors, school psychologists, BCBAs, and social workers. So our plan with this money is just to reallocate. Would be no new spending, but to reallocate some of that previously approved money through the ESSER grant to be able to cover that and meet this criteria. So this would include no new spending. For professional development, as you recall, we need to spend a minimum of $24,198 for the grant requirements. And the idea behind this is that this would be focused on social emotional coaching sessions, primarily for the elementary team. Our social emotional team has come up with a proposal for having 3 training dates on Saturdays. One of our greatest challenges this year is finding time to do professional development. It's incredibly difficult. Our lean professional development days are already booked, and we are having a very difficult time getting subs to be able to cover so that we can do some of our normal professional development. So the SEL committee came up with 3 dates, and the money, this $24,000 would be used to pay participants to attend those dates, thereby meeting the criteria of hitting that $24,198. The total budget for this would be about $25,000. In addition, the Summer Rams program, which we were very proud of last summer, as you recall, in summer 2021, we spent approximately $250,000. Most of that went to staffing, including coordinators, teachers, nurses, office hour staff, and resource officers, and also the use of iReady. So this money has also been allocated into that overall budget. And one of the supports from the Curriculum and Technology Committee is that they would like to see this program done for a couple of more years. So what we've done is allocated $275,000 each year of that learning loss fund to run summer RAMs for 2 more consecutive years. That would include staffing, supplies, and one of the things that we know we need to improve on is our registration process. So that would be part of this as well, to be able to clean that up and make that a little bit more user-friendly. Our hope with this approval is that we would start the advertising as soon as we can, start planning for it in December, lock in our staffing nice and early, let our families know that we're running the program again. And I think that pre-planning is really going to be key to the success this year. But this plan would include running that summer RAMs program both in the summer of 2022 and 2023. In addition, one of the buckets of money is the after-school program, approximately $48,000. And we looked at where this really could go to most use. And the first area we identified is through Keystone Tutoring. Keystone, as you know, is the end-of-year assessments for Algebra 1, biology, and literature. So our idea is to allocate money towards the high school to be able to pay teachers to run a tutoring program that is specifically designed to help support students in the Keystone content areas. In addition, we would be looking at having the remaining money from here split proportionally across the buildings so that each building can run after-school tutoring programs. And this would be used to pay teachers as needed on before after-school program. This could be done either individually or in small groups and can also support those students who are being quarantined. Teachers can then work with them either before or after school as well, and we can honor our teachers' time through that. So in summary, I tried to color code this because I think there's a lot of moving parts with a lot of different buckets of money. But what you will see here is, again, that ARP ESSER, that $871,000. You'll also see the set aside, which is the $241,000, and then the individual allocations, and then the overall budget. What you'll see on the top line is the summer RAMs program that was already approved and run, obviously in 2021. We have the next 2 consecutive years, 2022 and 2023. And that's approximately 800,000. And you'll see in order to kind of fill towards that, we would be using in part that ARP ESSER and then part that summer enrichment piece. In addition, we also had summer school supports. This past summer, we ran an ELD program. We also supported our summer school through EduSeer, our credit recovery. And so we would be looking at repeating that program as well for 3 consecutive years, and that would not to exceed $90,165. In addition, we've also previously approved the Gateway program that is up to $42,000. That's already been approved, so that's already part of it, but I wanted you to see how it all comes together in the full package. You'll see the social emotional support, that's the $72,000. Again, that's not new spending, that would be reallocating. We have the social emotional training, which is the elementary coaching, that comes to about $25,000. And then you'll see the two after school programs, tutoring programs for the Keystone tutoring exams, and also the K-12 before and after school program. The final piece on here, we had about $132,000 remaining. If you recall, both at the board level and also at the committee level, I conducted a presentation on supporting iReady, which is an intervention program, a diagnostic program, testing program for students. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to use the ESSER funding specifically for learning loss in this way. So what we would be able to do is, if you recall, the initial proposal was $386,000. At the time, the committee decided not to move that forward. That was in about, Linda, I believe, was September. And it was just for the fact that we know that it was a large amount of money. This covers 3 years of access. It's not $380,000 every year. It's a $380,000 upfront cost. With this new 7% set aside available bucket of money, we're able to cover a good portion of the iReady if we were to go in this direction. We would not be able to cover it all, so it would still leave with about $253,700 coming from the unassigned fund balance. So what our hope is to share this presentation with you, this plan for how we would address learning loss or how we would allocate the funds that are addressed for learning loss. And what you will see is a motion that would be approved next week that would cover the overall plan of this, including the plan and the budget associated with that. So with that, I will take questions.
Just briefly, so learning loss is a very sort of vague term for me. I mean, just as a member of the board. So are we applying some data to this? I realize social and emotional health is very difficult to assign data to as well. But how are we going to measure success after this spend? Given, are there like, do we have a present and then a future? We close the gap, we celebrate, that sort of thing.
Great question. So this year, we've really started to focus, aside from this plan, we've really started to focus on reintroducing all of the assessments we've done in the past. Last year, we had a very difficult time getting consistency with data such as NWA MAP or FNP, just because our students were everywhere. So this year, we first tried to start with that. One of the things that we like about the iReady assessment is, or the iReady program, is that it provides a diagnostic assessment in the beginning, and then there's benchmarks throughout the year that students can take that 3 times throughout the year, and then there's individualized instruction. So primarily the majority of what I'm talking about is referring to the iReady, but what we could then use is that data to also drive our summer ramps program. One of the things last summer, we opened it up to everybody. We knew that our families were in very different positions as far as what their needs were, and some were bringing them back to summer rams because they wanted to get them back in the building, and we accepted all students. We need to have a discussion for summer rams about whether or not we want to do a little bit more focused and targeted intervention for students and use both the iReady data and also NWA MAP to really target the students who would be participating. So with that, we would then have iReady over the course of 3 years, so we can use that data to determine, did it have an impact over the summer? Did it have an impact over the 3 years of the program?
In the beginning of the presentation, I thought you said this, what was the 7% set aside number in the beginning of the presentation that you had?
It was 240, it's 241,983.
Is a 7% set aside.
Is a 7% set aside. And then there's 2 buckets, one for the summer enrichment and one for the after school programs, which are both 48,396.
So is that within the 248 or
It's
whatever?
not.
So it's additional.
Yes.
So then the total 7% set aside is 338.
I don't believe the summer enrichment and after school fall under the set aside, but they fall within a kind of a separate, they have 3 separate spreadsheets when they gave us our allocation. So they had the 241 on one spreadsheet and the other 2 on 2 separate spreadsheets. So I don't believe they are termed underneath the 7% set aside, but I have to follow up on that.
Because I'm trying to follow what's written in the agenda as
Sure.
well, because the numbers are, because when you talked about the original money that we got through ESSER was a little over $1 million for learning loss, and we spent like you said, we spent like 250,000 or whatever, which brought us down to 800 and some thousand dollars. Correct?
So the original allocation that we had for learning loss through the ARP ESSER was 871,755. I confirmed that with Mr. Fink to make sure my number was accurate, and that's of the $4.3 million.
Okay, so the money that we spent this summer then, the learning loss or RAM, whatever you want to call it, the summer RAMs,
Yes.
where'd that money come
It
from?
came from that bucket. So what you're seeing here is all of the money and all of it put together. So for example, the summer RAMs 2021, even though I have it shown as 800,000, that includes what I spent this past summer from the ARP ESSER. I wanted to present it as one plan.
Right, so then you're only dealing with 600 some thousand left.
Correct.
Because when I know that when we originally talked about iReady, there was a lot of questions about it, and I'm concerned about we're throwing in close to $400,000 into this bucket, and I believe what Mr. Schaefer is saying. Like, there's still things that we don't know yet, and that's what I've talked about numerous times. And I talked about that, this whole learning loss is going to continue for at least additional 2 to 3 years, possibly longer. And I have concerns about, as we do this over time, where the money's going to come from to keep that program going.
So fair enough. And I agree with you. I think that's one of the approaches I took when trying to plan out this whole budget, is I wanted to cover this for a couple of years. So it wasn't just a once and done. So with this overall plan, it would cover 3 years of summer RAMs. It would cover 3 years of those summer school supports, and it would cover 3 years of iReady that could be used as the tier 1 interventions within the classroom.
Right.
But I do agree with you that it's not just a once and done as far as trying to address
right, but you're talking about overall, you're talking about $1.4 million, right? And you kind of threw in this $386,000, and then you talk about, of that, $254,000 is going to come out of the unassigned fund balance. Well, what's going how's that going to be replaced?
So the unassigned fund balance, I don't have a plan for that.
Okay, well, that's $250,000.
Yes.
Which there's a reason why that unassigned fund balance is in place. And if we take out of it, there's reasons why and what we need to do to put back in.
Sure.
So that's an issue in itself. And I don't see anywhere in here the incorporation, or maybe you mentioned it, but I didn't hear it. How does our special education students play into this?
So the special education students would be this would give us access for all students. So that can certainly be used as part of that, but this does
But we
not.
don't know.
What do you mean?
We don't have a plan yet.
It would include all students.
Okay, but we know that all students have different needs,
Correct.
and different needs, costs associated with those different needs vary.
So each student, when they participate in iReady, they would take a diagnostic assessment, and the diagnostic assessment is supposed to identify what the specific needs are and then provide instruction to help address those needs.
Right, but what I'm saying is that potentially you might not have enough money.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Potentially you may not have enough money.
With this plan, correct. I'm trying to be completely transparent that this plan, what we could do is eliminate the iReady piece, and then we would still be left with $130,000 that we could still allocate through the plan. So yes.
No, you'll be $254,000. Or no, you actually $386,000 if you don't implement the iReady. No matter what, iReady is costing you $386,000.
Correct.
So that's almost $500,000 that you're putting towards iReady. And it still goes back to the question that we never have answered yet, because we don't know. And I don't expect you to. And I think what Mr. Schaefer's kind of saying is that we don't know what we're going to be confronted with over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So when I look at all these numbers, it just doesn't, and then taking the money out of the unassigned fund balance, I mean, I have real issues with that.
But isn't that what, I mean, I understand nobody likes to take money out of the unassigned fund balance, but when you've had a pandemic and you have this much lost learning, isn't this the time when you need to occasionally use unassigned fund balance to infuse some money and then pay it back once we've gotten our students back up to where they should be? I mean, when we have a stadium that needs to be ADA compliant, we sometimes take money from capital funds to do this type of thing because we have all these things going on and we need to have an ADA compliant stadium. So I think that this is, in this case, a necessary evil. I also think that you can't, I mean, I understand that you're saying that we don't know what we don't know, but I don't understand that that's a reason then to not support these lost learning issues and these social emotional issues that, as we've all talked about, are the biggest fallout from the pandemic.
Well, property never has budget issues, first of all. Second of all, I think what Mr. DeBello is saying, I agree with him also, Ms. Fazzini. It's just not that we don't support it. There's a concern where the money's going to come from. And that's going to be the challenge. I mean, here we're saying 21, 22, and 23, where next year is 22. So I think it's just something that has to be on the radar of this board, that in order for us to continue this program, that we have to find money. And the best thing to do is to talk about it now. So moving forward, we can put that on everyone's radar. Dr. Murray, one quick question. Are we covered for devices with this program?
Well, I'm sorry, one more time.
Covered with devices?
Devices would not come out of this bucket of money. I know I'm going to look at Jim Fink. I know that we had devices come out of some part of ARPESER, but it would not come out of the learning loss funding part.
Where's Jim?
Is that accurate? The devices came out of ESSER funding?
What new devices would be needed?
Well,
Nothing with this.
So there's no need there.
Okay.
So the 386,000 for the 3 years, is that the next 3 years, which is going to tag on, or does that include this past year? So we have 3 more years with that.
The time would start when we submit the PO. So it would not include this, I mean, it would start moving forward whenever we would submit it. So if it means we go December, December, we go December, December. They're not going to count this year as a full year.
Okay, and I know it's expensive. We've talked about this. One of the things that I know that you were looking for are solutions for from a variety of things. One of them is for the past learning loss that has occurred, that we know it takes multiple years for students to catch up with what they have lost. Another concern is the students that are quarantining right now, those that are either well or well enough to do work, that my understanding is the iReady provides at least K through 8 with the students or the teachers the opportunity to provide what would be considered meaningful work for their students, because I know we've been talking about those options. They were tasked kind of with the school board, right? So I want to get back to my question, if you feel that this is the best tool for that. But the other, quarantining the current the loss that has occurred, but also this would cover our summer programming then for the next 3 summers. So we could provide similar programming that we'd had in the past. So do you feel that this is the best tool to answer those 3 things that we're looking to address at this time?
So I do. I realize that one of the things I struggle with, it was the price tag of it. And you know, I shared that at the curriculum committee as well. I do think it's a great product. We used it over the summer, so it was a good opportunity to kind of pilot it. We were able to get good data from that. And what I liked about the program is that after you have the data, there's 2 things that occur. Number 1, students automatically have an individualized learning path based on the results of the data that they can use at any time. They can use it in the classroom, in the buildings, they can use it at home. The other piece I liked about it is that the teacher then gets the data and can specifically push out lessons to individual students based on their need. And this could be for remediation. This could be the student who needs a little bit more. One of the things that we're really trying to push in especially in our elementary buildings, is the idea of doing station work within our classrooms, where teachers can work with small group instruction. You know that small group instruction is where a lot of power comes from as far as learning loss and recovery. But in order to have the opportunity to work in small group instruction, you need to have something else for your other kids to do. So in the class, a teacher would set up learning stations, and that might be an independent activity. It may be an opportunity for cooperative work, but they're all meaningful learning opportunities, and one of which can be a technology station where students would work on iReady within their individualized learning path and where their needs are. So it really offers a nice opportunity to meet students where they are, provide resources for students during quarantine that a teacher does not have to create content. They can push out lessons that are where the students are. And I think it also gives a lot of good diagnostic data to be able to better understand where students are so that we can meet them at their level, both in iReady, but also instruction within the classroom as well.
I also wanted to add that the curriculum department is also going to evaluate all digital programs for need and redundancy. So hopefully that will mean that we can eliminate some things, and that will reduce some of our costs, and possibly we can return some money to the balance, unassigned fund.
I'm very glad you brought that up, because I did not mention that, but I think that needs to be part of our 3-year plan. This is specifically 3 years. And within that 3-year plan, we need to really evaluate this program in comparison to some of the other programs, and then have a continuation plan beyond there. I don't have the continuation plan right now because I really want to see the data over the next couple of years. But what our department has to do is evaluate. After 3 years, did it do its job? And are we done with it? Because we addressed learning loss, or is this a valuable program enough that we want to continue? And if that's the case, then we need to look within the curriculum budget to have more of a sustainability plan, because this is quite a price that would need to be built within the curriculum budget. But with that, I think we have to do our due diligence by evaluating all of the digital programs that we have and see whether or not there's any overlap, and whether or not, what that continuation plan would be after 3 years.
So
Does
we
that
did
include-
talk, go ahead.
Does that include Canvas?
I'm sorry.
Does that include Canvas?
It's not, because Canvas is the shell. Canvas is the learning management system. But what it might include is the content that we're developing through Springford Cyber. So Springford Cyber content will be developed within Canvas. At that point, we should have the majority of our classes covered, created. And we would then evaluate, is this something that we would need in addition to the content that we already have created? Does it do two different jobs? But I don't think it competes with Canvas itself, because it's two different purposes and two different platforms.
So the only thing I'm going to leave you with is that you said that you touched upon my other question, and we're going to spend $400,000 up front. They want $400,000 up front, which I have a hard time supporting that. I would never pay $400,000 for a software package up front when we don't know how well they're going to deliver on the package, how well it's going to meet our need. I mean, there's so many things that come into play. And then how does that, after year 1, 2, or 3, what does year 4 look like, and what is that going to cost? I mean, we don't know.
I don't. That would be part of the planning.
This is, and these were some of the questions I asked you when you originally brought this up, a curriculum about iReady. Not that I'm not necessarily against it, but I mean, this is how we get into a trap of all of a sudden we have a $500,000 package, and now we got to go to the budget and add that in somewhere along the line. Well, $500,000 is a 0.5% tax increase. So $500,000 is a lot of money. And I guarantee you the price of this isn't going down in 3 years. I've spent many years in the software industry, and I know that once they got you and you have it integrated into your system, into your school, they're not coming back with, oh, we'll give it to you because we're really nice. So it's pretty expensive endeavor, and I again, when I'm looking at these numbers, I'm just not, and I don't like the money coming out of the unallocated fund balance as well, but that's either here or there.
Okay, so I just want to go back to when we were talking about this in curriculum. I think my major concern was about keeping it for the summer, because I thought it was, maybe a little soft last year because it just needed more time to be developed and rolled out. And I know you were trying to pull it together. There was just so much else going on. So I know that you wanted to start early, and you did even mention that tonight, that you want to get the ball going sooner and have it more systemic, have a better plan to approach it and how it's going to get rolled out and communicate it. So my biggest concern was keeping it for the summer. And then I was happy to see about the extra money, but it does scare me a little bit about pulling. There's still a balance, and a significant balance, that has to be pulled from the unassigned funds. And the other thought of that is that we're still paying for these other platforms. And I thought the plan was going to be that we were going to evaluate their effectiveness compared to what we know about iReady, and then decide which way we were going to go forward, but not necessarily with both. I think then the extra money became available. So it was like, okay, let's do this too, and truly evaluate which items that we want. My question is, we're still looking at that 241,000. If you want to do this, is there any way to do that evaluation of the other programming, get out of that, save some of that money to apply to this money? Has any of that been looked at?
I don't think that we can do it that quickly. And I purposefully prioritize the items up here where that using the money, because the curriculum committee did mention they wanted the focus to be on summer RAMs. So I wanted to do that first. So I did put this in a kind of a priority order here, so that the summer RAMs would take place over the next couple of years, and then that remaining money would then be allocated for the iReady if we could. So that evaluation takes some time, and because those materials are used in different capacities, it's not something that I would feel comfortable saying I could do that right now and get it to you within the next month. I would prefer that we would maybe move forward on the rest of the plan and not on iReady. And then we can take more time to do that then, but at least have the plan of moving forward with the rest of the plan.
Can you do the rest of the plan without the iReady? Do you lose that ARP ESSER Do you lose that 7% by not
So-
doing?
So what we will have to do is show, the one bucket that we would have to address is that 19,359 that would need to be spent on reading support and interventions. So you'll see that that covered some of the iReady that would fall under that bucket. So I would need to have a plan to be able to cover that 19,000. The rest of it, though, would hit all of the other targets because we are spending it at least the minimum on the social emotional. We're spending the minimum on the PD, and we're spending the minimum on the summer and after school program.
So you're saying you could do all of the others and then do an inventory of what is working in our district and decide at a later time after a very strategic overview of what we have, what works well, and then decide if you wanted to continue with that programming or move to iReady. We don't have to do this all at once.
Correct,
We could do it in steps
correct,
and
So-
not touch the unassigned funds.
correct.
Thank you.
So the plan, what we could do, if that's the will of the board, I could adjust the motion to include everything that's on here with the exception of iReady. And then we would just have to be aware that there is a certain, that's not a spend down of the entire learning loss plan, but that's gives us about 132,000 that we would still have to identify, which could be used for that, or could be used for something else, or could be reallocated to one of those other items as well.
I do just want to point out is if we decide not to go forward, which is fine, with that we will have a summer lost learning program and we will have tutoring. But we won't have a day-to-day program that's working on kids who are being left behind by quarantining and kids who are being left, who have just, due to diluted education, virtual and in person, who are, day-to-day, we're not really working on lost learning.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the Keystone exam tutoring is not something that we have, and that would be used to help the kids that took the Keystones and as a result of COVID, maybe didn't do too well.
Correct.
So
We will
that
have
would help.
tutoring, but that's an after-school thing. That's not something
Sure,
that's in the classroom.
The one piece I need to then look into more is that 19,359, because that indicates that we have to use a minimum on reading support and intervention. So I have to look at exactly what that means and how we would identify that. That could potentially mean that we could use it for iReady for the summer. But I would need to do some more digging onto that piece first before I could commit either way on that piece. But that would be the only other bucket that wouldn't be addressed in the other items that are listed in this budget.
Can you look at that for next week? Thank you.
Yes.
I've got one
I
more
guess
question on
my
that already.
concern with this, I'm gonna support my good friend at the end of the table, Ms. Fazzini. We shouldn't be value engineering this right now. This is an item that should have been vetted at committee. And the costs were talked about, so nothing is new with the cost, where the costs are coming from, which this is not new. I just think this is not,
It's not new, but not everybody was in favor of. I mean, there was discussion about it. I think it was agreed to that we would have Dr. Murray do a presentation about the information to be shared with the full board. But I do not believe there was a consensus as to where to go with that. Is that fair to say, Linda? Is that? I think there were just still a lot of questions.
I
even
don't, at
after.
the past couple committee meetings, all the committee has not been there, so.
That's true. I was on Zoom or the phone call on the last one, and I did struggle to follow along, but I did follow up and get that information too. I'm
so,
just not 100% there.
fair enough. So we're asking Dr. Murray to go back and massage this and bring it back to the board?
I thought I
What are we,
I thought I heard her say that the adjustment would be to pull out iReady for right now so that the board could approve the other items so that they continue to develop, like implement that plan.
Well,
Is that what I heard you say?
With approval, I'd like to go and submit the application that's due on the 29th for everything else. If the board's not ready to move forward with iReady, we can pull that piece out and bring the rest of it, and over the next week, I can figure out that 19,000 and make that really clear and make the adjustment on the motion for next week as well. Or that can be also a part that we know that we just have to address within the plan.
Because that application is due the 29th. So you
Correct.
really need to get that ironed out and finalized.
I think this is clear as mud, but I support you on this, Dr. Murray. I just don't support watering this down, with all due respect to the board members here. So you're gonna go back and massage this and bring it back to us. What do we gain by what are we losing here?
Yeah, I don't support watering it down either.
My questions that I asked weren't about watering this down. My questions were asked about how the money is going to be replenished back into the fund balance. And my questions were related to after 3 years, there's a cost, and where's that money coming from? That's all I'm asking. I mean, I'm not saying I don't support the recommendation. I do have a problem where we keep buying these packages, and I'm sorry, but a lot of the things that you talked about this evening was the same things that you talked about when we were talking about Canvas. So I struggle, and at curriculum, when you talked about this last month, I did ask that question. What's the difference between Canvas and iReady? And the biggest thing what I heard was that iReady is better set up or situated for assessments, right? And
Well,
there's already lesson plan or lessons or that are available through iReady that staff doesn't have to develop. If I remember correctly, they were the two big pieces, right?
Correct.
Right? So, because I was trying to understand, well, we're doing all this with Canvas. We put this whole movement towards getting Canvas implemented, getting teachers on Canvas, getting the lessons, because I struggle when I hear that if the kids are at home because of quarantining, all these lessons are supposed to be available on Canvas now, right?
Not all the ones that are being created through Springford Cyber yet.
Well,
That's
I'm not
being
talking about
developed this
cyber,
year.
I'm talking about in school here. Because if Canvas is being fully used, these lessons are available because that's what we keep being told when Ms. Sazowski brought up last month when she talked about, students that are quarantining, they're missing out because we're doing asynchronous learning, and she was concerned about that. And the biggest response that we got was that, no, this information is available for them to do the lessons at home through Canvas, right? So we're talking about another $400,000 roughly on another tool that does assessments and has prepackaged lessons. Correct, right? And we still don't, I asked two questions, it has nothing to do with you, it has nothing to do with this package. I always ask these questions all the time. If we're taking the money out of the fund, how's it going back? And this plan does not talk about, we're spending $400,000, and then 3 years from now, is it a 3-year license? Is it a license for eternity? I mean,
It's a 3-year license.
it's a 3-year license. So in 3 years, there's going to be a price tag, and we don't know what that is, and that should be negotiated up front. I know Mr. Fitzgerald is always all over tough negotiations, but we should already have that baked in. We should already have an answer to that question. We should say in 3 years, the price is going to be a 7% increase or whatever. So if we go into this relationship and we don't know what our renewal is going to be, get the checkbook out, right? So I agree with Mr. Jackson. Some of this is clear as mud, but I'm not saying water it down. All I'm saying is that I'm asking these questions that we need to have answers. Maybe the rest of the board doesn't care. Maybe they do. I don't know. I'm not hearing that. I'm just asking these questions because if we're going to spend close to $500,000 on $400,000 on a software package, we're spending $400,000. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. We're spending $400,000 on a package. So these are questions that we should have, and this is the same thing I said to you when we talked about a curriculum. These are the same questions that I still didn't get, an answer for. And I'm not questioning, if this is your recommendation, then I'm not questioning that because that's what you're here for. You're supposed to make these recommendations, but I am going to question the spend, and I'm going to question, what I just mentioned.
Sure.
Dr. Murray, is the intent of iReady really to address the learning loss within the district and really, as you're looking at a 3-year contract, are you really anticipating it being 3 and done? Or is there an expectation that there's a potential for renewal at a later date?
I can't tell you that right now. I think the idea of having the ESSER funding to be able to fund part of it right now was appealing so that we could specifically use it to address learning loss right now. I think that would be part of the 3-year evaluation that we would do to determine where does that fall within some of our other programs. For example, we have NWEA MAP. We spend about, off the top of my head, I think it's about $57,000 a year on that. It is an assessment program, but it doesn't provide the instruction. So we would do an evaluation on that to see is the data that we get between the two of them something that maybe we would consider replacing, or how would those two programs complement each other in the future? But that would be part of what we're doing. So truthfully, if we didn't have ESSER funding, I'm not sure that I would be bringing this right now, but I am bringing it as an idea of addressing learning loss. And with this money that can be specifically used for learning loss. We did have success with it over the summer, but I'd be lying if I didn't say the price tag itself to me is still something of a concern. But I do think that it's a quality program.
Great, thank you.
Mr. DeBello, you're correct. Watered down is not the proper term, and I know your heart's in the right place. You have lived this budget for the last decade, so I know the questions that you're asking, and they're completely valid. Yeah, I am concerned where the money's going to come from in the future, but then it becomes the balance of what do we do to address it versus the concern for where the money's going to come from. And sometimes those are very tough decisions. You and I both know that, and this is going to be a tough decision going forward. It's just going to be tough on the budget, and I'll leave it at that.
But I guess I'm on your last response, I'm really confused because are we bringing this in for learning loss? Or are we bringing it in for a long-term solution towards addressing helping with student assessment? I mean, what is the goal? Is it?
I think the goal is to be able to use this program to diagnose where students are.
Over time.
What's that?
Over time.
Over time. Clearly identify where students' needs are and then provide direct instruction to be able to address those specific needs. Now, is that something that might be filling a gap right now because of the challenges of COVID? And over time, we may say, okay, this did its job and we're done. We're going to not use it and not renew it, possibly. Is this, is this something that I can say we're going to have for 5-10 years? I don't know. I can't tell you at this point. Potentially, but I would want to evaluate that.
So, and I think right now we are in extraordinary times, and I don't think 3 years ago anybody could imagine we are where we are now. So in 3 years, where will we be? I do think that it provides solution at this moment. I would like to see, and Canvas is a vehicle for lessons. So iReady has the lessons there and the assessments and everything built in. But I would like to kind of follow on that vein is that one of our goals as a district has been to get as many lessons for our students, specifically designed for our students, up on Canvas. And continuing to do that may provide us with that opportunity to or fill that need so that we may not need to have this kind of program 3 years from now. It wouldn't provide the same kind of assessment, but with a less expensive assessment tool. I mean, that would be something perhaps we could look at too. But seeing that we don't know where we're going to be in 3 years, but we do know that at this moment, this would answer the summer program for us, the quarantining learning loss at this moment that we have, and also the past learning loss we're trying to catch up on. I find that I think it's a valuable tool for that at this moment and worth the risk that we don't know where we'll be with it in after the 3 years are over.
So just a question on that, because I think you're right. I guess the kids that are quarantining, they're following along in Canvas and they're doing their work asynchronously, and the schoolwork is loaded into Canvas, like Dr. Wright is saying. So for this hefty price tag, how do you propose this is going to help those kids that are quarantined want to keep doing what's on the canvas. They want to stay with their class so that when they come back from quarantining, which, I hope is shorter and shorter with the test to stay program, but they come back from quarantining, they want to kind of jump right back in and be with their class. So they're really going to do Canvas. You're having them do this for kids that you identify on top of? Is that a huge percentage? I mean, I think I must be missing something.
No, it would not be, this would be a tool that would be used in the classroom for all students. So then it could be accessed through Canvas, but it would be a tool that can be accessed for all students and used as part of instruction for all students. So when students are potentially quarantined, the teacher would still post content on Canvas, but they could also say, work on your iReady individualized learning path for 20 minutes today, which would be, again, right in line with what they might be doing in the classroom, because it would be a tool that could be used in the classroom.
Right, so if you were looking for a skill, for example, a teacher would be covering, adding fractions with unlike denominators would be their goal. That's the Pennsylvania Department of Education has said that this grade level is something that they're supposed to learn. The student isn't there. The teacher can put the lesson on Canvas, say this is what we're covering these days, but the student isn't getting that same kind of instruction. So an example of how this tool could be used is that the teacher could assign them the lessons in iReady that align with this. They could take an assessment. If they know how that skill, then they're fine, they could move on. But if they don't, it would provide a tutorial for them and the opportunity for them to learn. And then the teacher would get this information to be able to tell where the student had learned that skill. So when they come back to class, they would be in the same place. Am I on mark with that? I mean, it's a very simple.
I thought that
kind
was
of
a very good explanation. So,
Thank you.
simple, thank you. Okay. Okay, so what is the direction of the board then to, Mrs. Earl, were you going to say something at one point on this topic?
I was just curious about the 3-year situation for the iReady program. Why is it take it or leave it 3 years? There's no negotiating that it's 1 year at a time?
No, they have I could buy it for 1 year. We were able to get a discount by doing it for 3 years. I did not think that when we dropped it even down to 2 years, the pricing for 2 years didn't make sense versus 3 years. So it kind of fit, and it fit within the plan of, but we did get a discount for having multiple years.
Okay. So direction, thank you, Dr. Murray. I think that sums up a lot of the questions and comments. Is there a direction from the board as to, would we like to see the motion as it is for next week, or do we want to ask for any changes or additional information?
I would lean towards leaving it the way it is, and thank you very much, Dr. Murray. I think that we're charged with, educating students. I mean, this is a school district, and where there's, Mr. DeBello has expressed, a lot of concern over learning loss in the last months, 15, 20 months. And so I think this is an opportunity to help close that gap. And I think it's critical. And I think it's our core mission and goal and objective. And it's why we exist. And I think we need to make sure that those kiddos get, fill those gaps. And if this is a tool that will help them accomplish that, I think we move forward with the plan as Dr. Murray presented this evening. So thank you, Dr. Murray.
I got a
Any other
question. The last sentence in the motion says 3-year access iReady for math and reading K-8, but I thought I saw K-12.
No, iReady is only K-8.
So what was I'm confused now.
Question is, what is the direction of the board?
No,
Do
that's
we-
not
do
my
we-
question. My question is I saw a K-12 up there, and that's where I'm a little confused.
I think that was under tutoring.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other thoughts from other board members?
I'd leave it as it is.
I'd like to go forward with it.
So, okay, Dr. Murray, thank you.